Welcome, and thank you for joining Zonta International for this special webinar in celebration of Amelia Earhart Month. Zonta celebrates Amelia Earhart in January because on January 11th, 1935, she departed Honolulu and arrived in California 18 hours later. Amelia was the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to the US mainland, and Zonta is the only non-flying organization that she joined. This year, 2025, is our 87th year of the Amelia Earhart Fellowship. The fellowship is Zonta's longest running service program. Amelia was a trailblazer, and our Amelia Earhart Fellows are following in her footsteps, breaking down barriers for women and doing groundbreaking research. The field of aerospace is much more diverse today than it was over 80 years ago. I'm very proud to be an Amelia Earhart Fellow, and during my 45 years of Zonta membership, I have had the privilege of meeting in person about 150 Amelia Earhart Fellows and many more virtually like today. We hope this will be an interactive session and invite you to join the conversation. We will have dedicated time for questions at the end. However, please feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It is now my pleasure to introduce two-time Amelia Earhart Fellow, supporting member of Zonta International, and member of Zonta's Amelia Earhart Fellowship Committee, Dr. Nicole Zellner. Nicole, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sharon, and welcome again to you all. It is wonderful to see so many Zontians, Amelia Earhart Fellows, and friends here with us today. My name is Nicole Zellner, and I'm a professor of physics at Albion College, an undergraduate-only college in Michigan, USA. I teach astronomy and physics courses to science and non-science majors, and I study lunar samples to study the evolution of the moon and the solar system. Amelia Earhart Month is the time when our global Zonta international community celebrates the trailblazing spirit of Zontian and famed aviator Amelia Earhart. It is also the time to recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of our more than 1,700 Amelia Earhart Fellowships from 79 countries around the world. I'm honored to have 4 Amelia Earhart Fellows here with us today to explore the connection between medicine, weather, wildfires, reduction of pollutants, fluid flow in nature, and how these topics relate to our daily life. Before we dive into discussion, I will briefly introduce them. Dr. Beth Ebert is a 1983 Amelia Earhart Fellow from the United States. She is currently a Senior Principal Research Scientist and Forecast Quality Team Leader in the Bureau of Meteorology's research program in Australia. Dr. Ann Staples is a 2002 Amelia Earhart Fellow from the United States. She is currently an Associate Professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Virginia Tech University. Dr. Priyanka Dopade is a 2012 Amelia Earhart Fellow from Canada. She is a senior lecturer at the University of Auckland and visiting fellow at the University of Oxford. Dr. Anna Maria Caprariu is a 2016 Amelia Earhart Fellow from Greece. She is the founder and CEO of IC Green, which focuses on reduction of pollutants and development of energy optimization strategies in the maritime industry. Thank you all again for being here with us today and for lending your expertise to this timely conversation. Let's get started. At this time, Beth, I will pass the floor to you.
Thanks, Nicole. And Shannon, if you could put the slides up, please. So I'll start talking. So my name's Beth Ebert. I'm a Senior Principal Research Scientist at the Bureau of Meteorology, which is Australia's National Weather Service. I study meteorology, which is the weather and climate of our amazing planet. I took this photo in July when we were on holiday in an outback town called Coober Pedy. Maybe some of you have been there. It's where 90% of the world's opals are mined. But scenes like this are why I chose to follow meteorology. So I loved nature, I loved science. Both my parents were scientists. And I wanted a career that allowed me to be creative, and also to do useful things. And so an applied science like meteorology was perfect. As was mentioned, I was awarded Amelia Earhart Fellowship in 1983. I think that's before a few of our panelists were born. I was in my third year of graduate school at the University of Wisconsin, and very grateful for being awarded the fellowship. And it gave me the confidence to continue my PhD in a field that was very male dominated. And I'll have a little bit more to say about that later. Next slide, please. So I'd like to say a little bit about the impact of meteorology in my research on your daily life. So weather affects all of us every day. It affects what we wear, how we travel to work, what activities we do, and how we stay safe from hazardous weather. And so over my career at the Bureau of Meteorology, I've had the good fortune to work in lots of different areas of weather, and I'll just tell you about two of them today. When we think about weather, we often think about how warm or how cold it'll be, or whether it's going to rain or how much it's going to rain. Weather prediction is actually a fairly complicated activity, as you might know. So it starts with collecting observations from around the planet. It's very global science as well. We use weather stations, satellites, radars, ships, buoys, aircraft, lots of other platforms, always expanding. And these observations are then fed into numerical models of the atmosphere, or maybe even models where the atmosphere, ocean, and the land are simulated as one whole system. And then those models are integrated forward in time to come up with a forecast of weather at, it might be a few days ahead or a week or as long as a month or a couple of months. But these models aren't perfect, as we all know. And so there are typically systematic errors that we know about by comparing to the observations. And so my team and I have been researching how to measure those errors so that we can do something about them. And we've come up with efficient ways to statistically correct the output from the numerical models to come up with forecasts that are very, very accurate. Not just us, this is, like I say, a very global science. And as a result of this kind of research, the Bureau of Meteorology issues very reliable and accurate rainfall forecasts for the public, for you, for farmers, for any industries or other sectors that need to know about the weather, whether it's going to rain and how much. Next slide, please. But sometimes you can have too much rain. For example, in Valencia, Spain, you might remember this October, there were terrible floods that devastated the city, and more than 200 people died in those floods. Monsoon rains in India and Pakistan also resulted in hundreds of fatalities, and this is something that happens year after year. But early warnings for extreme events can help save lives by allowing people to prepare to protect themselves and their property and their livelihoods. Estimates vary, but we can be sure that thousands of lives are saved every year from floods and tropical cyclones, fires, heat waves, storms, and other natural hazards as a result of warnings. But warnings aren't as effective as they could be. So making effective warnings actually involves a lot of different people working together. So they all have to do their part. We think back to what's involved in making weather forecasts, observations and models and statistical corrections. But even beyond that, you have to anticipate what is the impact of those hazards on people and the environment. You have to create the warning. You have to disseminate the warning through media, through other channels. And then on the receiver side, users of the warnings need to receive the warnings, they need to understand them, make a decision, and then take action to protect. And so we can think of this whole process as a value chain, which is a complex network of data and information that's created and used and exchanged by all of the different people and groups in the chain. And so this information value chain ultimately leads to benefit, that is reduction in losses and damage and disruption. So recently I've led an international multidisciplinary team that's working on ways to improve warning effectiveness by describing and measuring how well the information is created and exchanged within the warning value chain. So we've created a comprehensive questionnaire and database to capture what's been happening in extreme weather events around the world, such as floods and cyclones and fires. We've described around 40 case studies so far in detail, and we're always looking for more. So if that's something you're interested in, please reach out. By examining what went well and what didn't go well, we can identify what are the weak links in the warning chain, and then we know where we need to invest more of our effort. And this work contributes to an important initiative of the United Nations called Early Warnings for All, which is an ambitious goal to ensure that every person in the world is protected by early warnings by 2027. So very ambitious. Next slide, please. So what about women in meteorology? I've got a photo here of Dr. Joanne Simpson, who was the first woman to get a PhD in meteorology in 1949, so maybe not so long ago compared to some sciences. She was a real pioneer in our science. She did groundbreaking work on clouds, how they form, how they grow, and especially their important role of clouds in driving the atmospheric circulation in tropical areas. NASA has a really great website about Joanne Simpson, so if you're interested in learning more about her life, I recommend looking her up on Google and going to that NASA website. So meteorology certainly was a male-dominated field and still is. I couldn't find a lot of data, but here's what I could find for the United States. So academic on the right and PhD holders on the left, we can see that even in the 1970s, less than 10% of PhD holders in meteorology were women, and there I am in 1987. But now, if you look at the right-hand side of the graph, and this is from a very recent paper, at least half of the graduate students are women, half of the assistant professors are now women, which is really great news. There are less than a quarter of full professors, but we can expect that to change with time. So definitely women are on the up. I've had a really great run in my career and watched the number of women grow as I've gone to conferences and meetings and so on. And I've really been able to follow my interests and contribute. So I feel very lucky that way. If I had to name my biggest personal challenge, it was probably transitioning in mid-career from doing science to leading science. It was a scary move. I had a lot to learn when I did that. And I did feel a little bit sad about leaving my own investigations to one side, but the rewards of being able to enable other people to do science more than made up for that. And so I like to now encourage younger women to consider leadership roles, even if they think that they might not want to do that, because it can be very, very rewarding. A few years ago, I made the decision to step back from a fairly senior leadership role and to go back to the bench and go back to doing science again. And that was also challenging. So maybe that's my second biggest challenge, because a lot had changed and technology just moves so fast. But I'm really glad that I did it. And I would encourage anybody in their career to think about their career as a very fluid sort of thing. And I think I'll finish there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth. Speaking of fluid, we're going to move on to Anne. Anne, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to speak to everyone today about where, after my career has taken me after being an Amelia Earhart Fellow, which I was in 2002. So can everyone see my slides? All right, I don't hear anything. I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm Ann Staples. I'm an associate professor of mechanical and biomedical engineering at Virginia Tech in the US. I was an Amelia Earhart Fellow in 2002 during my PhD at Princeton University, which I did in mechanical and aerospace engineering. And during my PhD, I studied turbulence. And I have since really changed my focus to biomedical engineering. That might seem really disconnected at first, but the thing that unites the two is fluid dynamics, so studying the physics of the motion of fluids. So in aerospace engineering, right, we would study airflow over an aircraft wing. In biomedical engineering, we would study blood flow, urine, airflow during respiration, etc. And so this figure on the top right here, you see an example of a typical fluid dynamics study, computational fluid dynamics from aerospace engineering. And then on the bottom, you see something a little bit more typical for my field, biomedical engineering today. So in biomedical engineering, what we're looking at here is simulation using computational fluid dynamics of blood flow through a blood vessel that's being stented to support it because there might be an aneurysm or some other issue. And that's one of many examples where we can use the tools from aerospace engineering, like computational fluid dynamics, in other areas. To talk a little bit about my specific work, let me just back up and say that a little bit about how I came to engineering in the first place and why aerospace engineering before I go into the medical work I've been doing. So I come from a long line of engineers. My maternal grandfather was an engineer, a civil engineer, and he designed lathes and machines, and he had his name on them, and I always thought that was very cool. My dad was an electrical engineer and a professor, and I always wanted to be an astronaut, but I'm claustrophobic, so it wasn't a possibility for me. So I think that going into aerospace engineering was my little, way to fulfill that wish in a roundabout way. So moving now into my research. So I've focused on many things. I run the laboratory for fluid dynamics in nature here at VT, and we do a lot of computational fluid dynamics and a little bit of experiments as well. We do a lot of biomedical applications I want to talk about too. So one of the things that we're focused on is building better hemodialyzers. So if any one of you knows anyone on dialysis, anyone experiencing kidney failure, it can be really onerous and difficult for people to go for their 3 times a week appointments for 5 hours to sit there at the dialysis machine, right? Because current dialyzers are not very efficient, right? They're artificial organs. They're meant to replace the function of a kidney. And what they do is they take the blood out of your body, filter it, just like a water filter, and then run it back into the body, right? But they're not very efficient. So we can use the principles of fluid dynamics learned in aerospace engineering to design better hemodialyzers. And so I've been involved with that for the past 2 or 3 years, working with Fresenius, which is the leading dialyzer company in the United States, developing computational fluid dynamics models of dialyzers so that we can adjust the design so that they clear toxins a little bit better than they do now. So that's the first project. You can see the figure on the top here. Here is a typical hemodialyzer. One really funny thing about this field is this was basically adapted from water filters in the 1960s. And the basic design of this artificial organ hasn't changed in decades. So that's one of my, dreams, is to see if we can really reimagine the design and do a little bit better. So I simulate blood flow through the device, calculate how many uremic toxins that would normally be cleared in our urine are cleared in different device designs. And I have actually 3 different provisional patents for that work. So hopefully that will be, technology that's deployed soon that will help, millions of people around the world. The second project that I want to talk about that really impacts people's daily lives is the infusion pumps that I've been developing So if you think of someone who's an insulin user or who needs some type of infusion of nutrition or needs chemotherapy infusion, a lot of patients have difficulty with the fact that they will be tethered to a hospital bed. They can't get up and move around, right? So that's really limiting. Or if it comes to an insulin pump, as we see in this bottom figure here, usually insulin pumps are pretty large. They're the size of maybe a cell phone, different dimensions, and they're tethered. And a lot of insulin users find that the bulk, the discomfort are reasons that they might not adhere to their insulin regimes. So I have developed in the laboratory an insulin pump that's wearable, the size of a nicotine patch, and that alleviates a lot of the complaints that people have and give as reasons that they don't stick to their insulin regime. And so how can it be as small as a nicotine patch and do the same thing as a typical insulin pump? Well, it's driven by the arterial pulse, right? So this is a bio-inspired insulin pump driven by your own pulse. And so you don't need a motor or a battery anymore to pump the fluid. And that is international patent application, which we'll hopefully go through soon. So hopefully, again, insulin users worldwide will soon have the choice of a really unobtrusive small patch instead of a bulky pump. So those are just two examples of how I've used my aerospace education for things that are really practical and could impact people's lives. There are many other examples. I think, thinking about what other girls and women can learn or how this can improve lives, you can obviously transfer your knowledge from one sort of specific discipline, aerospace engineering, to many different fields, right? And there's lots of cross-disciplinary things that are left to explore, fields that are left to explore. I think I'm just about at the end of my time. And so I'm actually going to talk about the looking ahead stuff here, just to continue with what I was saying. I think girls and women have a lot of unique perspectives in engineering, and we're starting to see a lot of that. So as women have entered mechanical engineering and biomedical engineering, we've started to see engineering research projects directed toward women's health, right? Which was something that when the field was dominated by men, no one it didn't occur to anyone to study this, but also energy, the environment, et cetera. Ongoing support from Zonta International and Amelia Earhart, which was so wonderful for me. And really, just to echo the previous speaker, really gave me the confidence. Like, it was a huge vote of confidence to move ahead, and also connected me with a global network of women. I'll speak really quickly because I think I'm out of time to some key challenges I've faced on the technical level. Just, looking at fluid flows on the micro scale, like in a hemodialyzer, is a little bit different from aircraft level scale. So there's some adjustment to be done there. Personally, and this is just a mistake I made that, you don't have to make when you apply your aerospace education to a different field. I still study turbulence and I study medical devices, and those are two really different fields. And so if all of my efforts were in one field, I'd probably get more funding and recognition, right? So I don't recommend splitting your research time. Just a tip. And of course, increasing representation is always good. If you can see it, you can be it. And, I've had countless young women tell me over the years how important it was to them to see me in front of the classroom. So I think I will wrap up there, and thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Next up is Priyanka. Take it away, Priyanka.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you all. It's such a privilege to be included on this amazing panel. Hope you all can still hear me. I just saw a message. Did anyone else lose sound?
Oh,
Okay,
you're coming across loud and clear, Priyanka.
brilliant. So my name is Priyanka Dapade, and I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Auckland. And so today I'm going to talk to you about the research impact of some of my research, which kind of encompasses quite a few different areas. So I definitely would have liked to hear Anne's advice earlier on in my career, because I've split it across different disciplines, across aerospace engineering and a little bit of, sociology and qualitative research as well. If we can go to the next slide. Yep, perfect. So I was born in India, and I've spent my childhood in India and the Middle East. And then my family immigrated to Canada when I was 10 years old. And that's where I learned about Roberta Bondar, who was one of my early inspirations. And again, like Anne, I wanted to be an astronaut when I was younger. So Roberta was the first Canadian woman in space. And so I ended up going into aerospace engineering. I did my bachelor's there in Canada, and then I moved all the way across the world to the other side, literally, and did my master's at Monash University and then my PhD at UNSW Canberra, which is where I won the Amelia Earhart Fellowship. So there on the right-hand side, that's me receiving my wings from Zonta Canberra back in 2012. And this was an amazing milestone for me because it allowed me to, oh, brilliant, there you go. Roberta Bondar is a member of Zonta Hamilton. So what the fellowship allowed me to do is, come up to the end of my PhD, and I was looking around for what comes afterwards. And so I got this amazing opportunity to do a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Oxford. And there usually isn't any funding assistance to move between such different parts of the world, between a PhD and postdoc. So the fellowship allowed me to do that. So I moved to Oxford in 2013 and then stayed on for 7 years looking at the environmental impact of commercial aviation, working on these big commercial jet engines and trying to increase their fuel efficiency, therefore reducing their environmental impact. And there, I joined, I used to attend the Zonta Club of London's annual celebrations, because every year we had new winners of the fellowship. And shout out to Britt, who used to organize all of these gatherings. And we actually built a really nice community of fellows who were, working around the area and used to come and meet together and celebrate the new fellows every year. I think that's actually one of our speakers, Anna, in the photo when she received her wings. So small world. Next slide. And what it also gave me the opportunity to do in 2016 was to apply to the Canadian Space Agency's astronaut recruitment call, which was, again, an amazing experience. So I was working in Oxford at the time. I applied as an overseas applicant to the Canadian Space Agency, and I actually ended up making it to the top 72 candidates. And you can see the total number of university degrees that were held by the candidates, 210 across 72 candidates who made it that far. And loads of them had PhDs in mechanical and aerospace engineering. About 32% of those candidates were women. And in the end, they only chose 2 people. And one of them was a woman, also a mechanical engineer. So I see that as a win. And so I got to do some of the assessments and learned a lot about the whole process, about myself, about what it takes to succeed and then fail. Obviously, I didn't make it past that point, but it was an amazing experience that I will always cherish. Next slide. So during my time in Oxford, the 7 years that I spent there, like I said, I worked on commercial jet engines. So as you may already know, commercial aviation contributes to about 2.5% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions and about 4% of global warming. And there's huge pressure on the entire industry globally to reduce those emissions. And so there's all sorts of research, all sorts of initiatives happening around, new types of environmentally friendly fuels, materials, etc. But what I ended up working on in collaboration with one of the biggest manufacturers of jet engines in the world, Rolls-Royce, who have a long-standing research collaborative relationship with Oxford's Thermal Fluids Institute, where I was based, to look at cooling technology. So what we do is we designed new cooling systems that allow the engine to be run at higher temperatures, which increases their thermal efficiency and therefore allows them to consume less fuel. And the jet engine is a very complicated machine with thousands and thousands of different parts. But I got to work on a lot of the projects across every major subsystem of the engine and got to know some of the cooling systems very closely. And so what this allowed me to do around, understanding the fluid flow and the aerodynamics, the heat transfer of these systems, improve engine efficiencies. And some of the work that I did was actually then installed as hardware on some of the newer models of the engine. So some of my work is flying around on Rolls-Royce engines, particularly the Trent 1000, which powers the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. And also the research that I did fed into some of Rolls-Royce's industry best practices, so around computational fluid dynamics and experimental processes, so that the research has a longer term sort of impact in terms of how things are done in industry. And all of that kind of works to increase the impact of the research and reduce some of the environmental issues around CO2 emissions and NOx emissions and all sorts of other impacts. Next slide, please. And then after moving to University of Auckland in 2020, New Zealand's a beautiful place, and I knew that I wanted to change some of my research direction, still stay in the aerospace area, but there is no commercial aviation industry in New Zealand to support a lot of the things that I was doing. So I sort of took a step back, and I wanted to do things that were even more impactful and maybe diversify across different areas. So I kind of tried to understand where engineering fits within society and how society fits within our physical and natural environment. And so I took my background in aerothermal engineering and I applied it to the emerging space industry here in New Zealand. So that's how the Sustainable Space Initiative was born. It's on the top left-hand corner there. Because we're trying to understand the environmental impact of space technology. Because space is so embedded in our everyday lives. Every time we use a mobile phone, we're accessing satellite data, but all of the infrastructure that goes into making that possible has environmental impacts associated with it, from launch to manufacturing, life cycle impacts, and also the social and cultural impacts of having this satellite data embedded into everything that we do. So understanding the political, economic, social, and cultural environment, and then looking at where engineering can actually enable more sustainable solutions. So I'm looking at, applying that sort of aerodynamics, heat transfer, fluid dynamics knowledge to making launch vehicles reusable, and also looking at some of fluid mechanics in zero gravity. So if we can refuel satellites, we can extend their lifespans and reduce some of the environmental impacts associated with launch, and also reducing space debris. And then I also, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, I'm very passionate about supporting diversity and inclusion in engineering. Inclusion is one of the other research programs that I helped set up, which actually provides concrete data, evidence-based recommendations to make the engineering industry better, at least here in New Zealand, but a lot of those results can be translated to other contexts as well. So the human environment of engineering is also important if we want to get the best solutions that can have more impact. And then also in terms of working with Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous peoples here in Aotearoa was incredibly important to me when I moved here. So in the energy area, I work with some of the tribes up in the northern region of New Zealand, looking at renewable energy options. So again, transferring that thermodynamics and aerodynamics and heat transfer knowledge to working with some of these tribes to design better solutions that are more suitable, more localized to the remote and rural regions of New Zealand. Next slide, please. So in terms of women in my field, so across mechanical, aerospace, and engineering in general. So I teach, I lecture thermal fluids courses here at the University of Auckland to mechanical engineers. So you can see on the left-hand side from 2010 to 2024, so in the last 15 years, our undergraduate cohort, I wish I could say we've recruited more women at the undergraduate level, but we really have not. The numbers have stagnated. The cohort is overwhelmingly male. And then when we look at how that translates into the New Zealand's engineering industry, so the pie chart in the middle, that's from Engineering New Zealand, 14% women, 86% men, and very few of them in senior and leadership positions. And then when you look at women in space globally, this is a report from the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs, and they did a sector survey globally and looked at some of these numbers. Again, in terms of scientific and technical positions, women are represented at only 23%, few more at the legal or policy level, and astronaut training programs about 30%. Which is about the same as, the recruitment numbers when I applied in 2016 to the Canadian Space Agency. So I wish I could say that we're seeing more women in these fields. And if you go to the next slide, it kind of feeds into some of the framework concepts for improvements in the lives of women and girls. There's a lot of focus, and I certainly spent a lot of time on this during my time in Oxford, on schools outreach and encouraging girls to go into these fields, into these disciplines, role modeling, all of these important things, community building. I did a lot of that because I was president of the Women in Engineering network based at the University of Oxford. And there's a lot of focus on that. But what I found was that there isn't enough attention on what happens after these women come into these disciplines. So looking at retention, yes, I'm really sorry. I've got a few people who are talking around me, but I can't do anything about it. They'll be done soon. So what I wanted to do was focus on the retention of women and gender minorities in the industry. And so that's the inclusion research program that I helped set up at the University of Auckland. So what we're doing is actually a 5-year longitudinal research study to understand the experiences of graduates in the industry, and then use that data to make actual recommendations. So we're looking at things like sense of belonging, authenticity at work, cultural well-being, through surveys and interviews. And again, this is me moving into a completely different field, from doing computational fluid dynamics to qualitative research and understanding how to do thematic analysis and survey design, which is really fascinating. but trying to understand those points where women actually change their perception of their future careers, where they start to decide that they want to leave. And there's some data that shows that that happens in the first 5 years. So this is why we designed this study to go up to 5 years and hopefully be extended beyond that as well, because a lot of these experiences are so long-term as well. So
I'm sorry to rush you through, but we are coming up on just 18 minutes left in our hour. So if you could take the next minute, please, to just wrap up so that Anna Maria has time to talk about her work and answer Q&A as well. Thank you.
yes, thank you. Just one final slide. I wanted to end on the note of encouraging everybody to invest in women. So the greatest challenge of my career, when people don't believe that I can actually do these things. And so this is the amazing thing about the Amelia Earhart Fellowship, that they actually invest in you, actual money, and that allows you to do things. And this is what Amelia Earhart did for herself, and she wanted for other women as well. So thank you to the Zonta Foundation, and thank you all for listening. I'm sorry for going over time.
Thank you, Priyanka. Anna Maria, we look forward to your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Perfect. I can see my slides as well. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation. It is a great pleasure to be part of this amazing panel and also present my work. Next slide, please. I will talk a bit about my research, which focuses on the development and implementation of energy-efficient methodologies and carbon emission reduction technologies in different sectors, in airspace, in shipping, and also in the built environment. And while these focus areas may seem industrial, they influence the daily lives of citizens in substantial ways. Next slide, please. Some of the examples of the impact in daily lives are the optimization of energy usage in buildings, which improves comfort levels, lowers utility expenses, and also enhances indoor air quality. All these are directly benefiting public health and well-being. In the maritime industry, innovations that make the vessels more fuel efficient not only reduce costs for transporting consumer goods, but also lessen air pollution around ports and coastal communities. In the airspace industry, the energy efficiency optimization and the pollution emission reduction lead to safer, more efficient and greener air travel with direct implications for global commerce and personal mobility. Next slide, please. Environmental sustainability is at the heart of my work by identifying strategies to minimize reliance on fossil fuels and integrating renewable or more efficient energy sources. My research aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate climate change. For instance, improving engines in shipping and airspace, or optimizing the heating or cooling demand of buildings. Collectively, these advancements have a profound impact on sustainability at both local and global scales. Next slide, please. So my intention is for this work to serve as a blueprint, not only for the technological progress, but also for elevating the role of women and girls in STEM by highlighting tangible achievements in energy efficiency and sustainability. I hope to inspire the next generation of female engineers and scientists to recognize that they too can drive innovation. So through my role as Director of Studies in Engineering at 2 colleges of the University of Cambridge, as well as through mentorship programs, workshops, and community engagement activities, I strive to enhance the skills and confidence, as well as support young women to excel in STEM fields. Next slide, please. So over the years, we have seen that there has been a gradual yet encouraging rise in the number of women entering aerospace and sustainable technology fields. Still, there are some areas of engineering and technology that remain male-dominated. But all these initiatives, such as targeted outreach, the scholarships, fellowships, including the very esteemed Amelia Earhart Fellowship, have significantly increased the number of women entering aerospace and sustainable technology research. So while there is still considerable work ahead in fostering and retaining women in these careers, because as Priyanka said before, the retention of women is another challenge. The positive trend suggests that continued advocacy can make a lasting difference. Next slide, please. So people often wonder why airspace. My interest in airspace has sparked in my childhood, watching shuttle launches and also reading about aviators like Amelia Earhart. And this, together with my passion for maths and physics, inspired me to get a PhD in engineering at the University of Cambridge, working on a Rolls-Royce project. And this gave me the foundation to address real-world challenges across airspace, shipping, and buildings. And at this point, it is quite important to acknowledge that the Amelia Earhart Fellowship, which I was awarded in 2016 during my PhD, was instrumental in my career, as it gave me the great privilege to be part of this inspirational and very supportive community of successful and pioneering women who are making a difference, and gave me the confidence to overcome any challenges during my journey. Talking about challenges, one of the greatest challenges that I have been facing is balancing high-level technical research, which requires constant learning and staying as well at the cutting edge of innovation, with my commitment to advocacy for women in STEM. Another challenge is navigating environments where women are underrepresented, and this often necessitates providing one's credibility more frequently. However, I find overcoming these challenges very rewarding, especially when I see how collaborative efforts advance technology, improve sustainability, and also encourage broader participation in STEM fields. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, my work aims to improve the daily life through advanced energy efficiency and carbon reduction technologies, all while championing a future where women and girls can thrive in STEM. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, 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 wow. I'm echoing what's being typed in the chat. These are amazing presentations. You are amazing women and doing fantastic work. Thank you again for your insights and your expertise. We will now open the conversation to questions from our audience. If you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and Shannon will read the question out loud for our panelists. Thank you.
Okay. From Sandy, we have, how has climate change affected your ability to predict extreme weather events? Nicole, I'll leave it to you to decide on who might be an appropriate person for answering this one.
Sure, I think this was actually a question to Beth.
Okay.
From the same person. So I'll just repeat it, Beth. How has climate change affected your ability to predict extreme weather events?
Oh, your audio, it got a little funky there. It was a jarble. Oh, maybe without the microphone. I don't know if you'd be able to do that today. So let's actually have would somebody, let's have, while Beth figures that out, we can have another question. and wait for her to figure out her technical difficulty. So we have another from Liz. It says, to all, we featured Caroline Credo Perez's book, Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. In our online book club series, I'm especially interested in including women in scientific studies, medicine, pollution, economics, etc., and in engineering, architecture, and design, including everything from seatbelts to safe communities to spacesuits. What are some women-specific concerns in the world of research that need more attention now?
And why don't you start that?
Sure,
Anne?
I'd be happy to talk about in biomedical engineering. So in biomedical engineering, the field of women's health is really exploding. And people are looking at things, you know, our menstrual cycle hormones really affect our protectiveness against heart disease. Um, and I don't know how many people know, but you know, for women during their reproductive years, we have extra protection from cardiovascular disease, which basically goes away after menopause. So things like that, you know, what are differences for women? There are many diseases that are experienced differently by women and conditions, and in addition to that. Just, you know, these newer areas that I mentioned before that really concern women more, you know, like there are people, I have colleagues who are modeling the biomechanics of childbirth, you know, which, you know, if we had not entered biomedical engineering, you probably wouldn't have happened for another 50 years.
Does anyone else on the panel want to answer that question? Otherwise, we've got some others that we can move on to. All right, Shannon, go ahead, choose the next question.
From Petra, we have, how important is it to start STEM for girls in school?
And Anna Maria, I'll have you start that answer.
Yes, so this is a great question because starting from school is the right time to give all of this inspiration and expose the children to different technologies so that they can find their interests and at the same time make the right choices when the right time comes to choose subjects and focusing their efforts on studying the right topics in order to sit for the exams and succeed in their choice of study of the relevant degree. And currently we see that unfortunately not everyone is fortunate to have in their environment engineers, scientists, and have that exposure. So I think it's important to have initiatives, communities, fellowships like the fantastic Amelia Earhart Fellowship, and school initiatives as well to give that exposure to the kids, and also role models are extremely important.
Do any of the panelists want to expand on that answer? I think we're all STEM graduates here, so I think it's, you know, we can all agree it's really important to start STEM for girls in school and to maintain their interest, especially in middle school, age around 12 to 14, when interest in STEM starts to taper off, it seems, at least in the United States. Shannon, go ahead, pick the next question.
Sure. We have from Donna. It says, I belong to a local women's rights organization. How can we best help support efforts to tackle the effects of climate change, or what can individuals do?
Beth, how's your mic? Can we have you start? Now we don't hear you.
Is this better?
That is better, yes.
Oh, okay. I think I inadvertently pushed a button I shouldn't have pushed. Yeah, climate change is so important, and I think there are studies now and people who are experiencing a lot of psychological distress. So it's not just a physical thing, it's an emotional and quite a scary thing. So it's important that we address it for lots and lots of reasons. I think early information sharing, there's children's books, some very good resources for young people about how the climate works and why it's important that we protect our climate. And I think getting that ingrained in people's their inclination or their belief system, so that they deeply want to protect the environment. I think that's really important.
Priyanka, you've said that you work with developing and improving energy efficiencies with Maori people. Can you expand on the answer a little bit too?
Sure. A lot of the Maori tribes, especially around the northern part of New Zealand, live in quite rural and remote areas, so they are actually susceptible to some of these effects of climate change around energy, stability and resilience. And so they're looking more to build their own kind of localized energy generation systems. So looking at solar, looking at hydro, and New Zealand has so many different microclimates and its geography is so diverse that we can actually work on some of these localized energy solutions. And they're starting to build more housing developments to bring some of their tribal members back to their ancestral lands. So there's a wonderful intersection of environmental and cultural impact there. So we've been working on designing housing developments that have access to these localized kind of solar energy solutions, and working with them to ensure that they have this energy resilience built in to their new housing developments.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for questions today. I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation, those of you who stuck it out to the end. You can support future women in aerospace engineering and space sciences like Beth, Anne, Priyanka, and Anna Maria, and ensure they are ready to lead the way into the future with a gift to the Amelia Earhart Fellowship Fund at zonta.org/donate. If you have any additional questions, please email programs@zonta.org. We will share a recording of today's session on the Zonta International website. Thank you again for your participation. Enjoy the rest of your day.